guys! Today I am here to do a review on the book I just finished, The Way of Shadows by Brent Weeks. Once again, for this review, I do have an order that I want to do things in. So first off, I'm going to give a quick synopsis of the story, then I'm going to go into some character development, talk about the characters a little bit, then I'm going to talk about the plot, and then at the very end I will give my overall opinion on the novel. So The Way of Shadows by Brent Weeks is a story about a young boy named Azoth who eventually becomes Kyler in the novel. At the beginning of this story, we find Azoth fighting for his life in the fictional city called Cenaria. Now, Cenaria is a city that has both kings and queens as well as the very, very poor peasants live in what they call the Warrens, which is essentially the very, very poor part of the city where people don't want to go, people don't want to visit there because it's just so dirty and unclean and full of people essentially just fighting for their lives. Azoth lives in this community guild that a whole bunch of other children who live in the Warrens also live in. So when the story really begins, we find Azoth, who comes into contact with Durzo Blent, who is the top assassin or wet boy, as they call them, in this city Cenaria. Azoth dreams of becoming a wet boy just like Durzo so that he doesn't have to live on the street anymore and so that he can help support his friends to move on from the lives that they're in to better lives where they can support themselves. After a series of events, some deaths, some crazy stuff goes down, and Durzo finally decides that he is willing to take Azoth in as an apprentice, and this is when Azoth gets his name changed to Kyler. Now the rest of the story I don't want to go into too much, but it is just basically following Kyler as he grows up and he learns to become an assassin from Durzo and everything that goes around that. He learns how to fight, he learns how to protect himself, he learns how to make poisons, he learns how to set traps, he learns how to kill, which is the most important part of being an assassin, and he also learns a little bit about magic. Next up, I'm going to go and talk about the character development. First off, I will talk about the main two characters, which is Kyler and Durzo Blent. So Kyler is, like I've mentioned, a young boy. He grew up as a street rat and eventually becomes a wet boy. The main thing about Kyler in this novel is that we do get to watch him grow from a child into an adult. We get to watch him learn and change and face his fears and overcome his emotions around becoming an assassin. We get to learn about his love interests, just get to see him grow. Now, Kyler himself is a very typical fantasy character. He's got all the elements that I find male protagonists in fantasy novels usually have. He's strong, he's courageous, he's overcoming fears, he's, got this dark, mysterious vibe to him, and he's just all around a very manly character. Durzo, as well as Kyler, does have that stereotypical manliness to him that we find in fantasy novels quite a lot. But we also get to learn about his weaknesses, watch him be impacted by these weaknesses and watch them change him as a person. And we're able to see how these weaknesses have affected him and have turned him into the person he is today. Now for me, Durzo was my favorite character in this series, or I guess in the first novel, just because we did get to see that fault in him and we did get to learn about his faults, and it just made him such a round character that I didn't find in Kyler as much. He was round in terms of we could see all sides of him. There's nothing really hiding. Once you reach the end of the book, you know about him, you know what influenced him, you know what made him do the things he did. So he was just pure in that sense, and even though he was the tough character, the mysterious character, and the character who you were, the main character feared, we still got to see him with heart and with motive for the things that he was doing. In this novel, there were a lot of female characters, but I can't really distinguish them from each other, which is really sad. I'm going to just group them all together, and this includes Doll Girl, this includes the princess, it includes like the queens. I don't know if it's because I'm new to booktube and I'm starting to like crazy overanalyze everything I read, but I felt like the females in this book were just portrayed so weak and vulnerable, and it was kind of over the top, and I was kind of a little uneasy about it. The girls in this book were always the love interests of the main characters. They never really just were there on their own. They always came with a man who was stronger, who was more powerful. Even though we think in the beginning of the book that there may be a strong female lead, she turns out not to be a strong female lead, and I don't want to mention who this is because it's probably going to spoil it for you, but then in turn it turns out that everything she did was motivated because of a man in the story, and that for me was really sad, and I felt like it was a missed opportunity for, you know, a whole new level to be brought to this novel. Now, I guess I haven't read enough high fantasy like this one in particular to know, but I feel like that is just kind of the genre, and I feel like they do focus a lot on male protagonists and their strengths, and you know, it's assassins and they're fighting and there's blood and there's gore and there's no place for a woman there, right? But like, I don't know, I feel like some kick butt assassin female was definitely needed in this book, and it would have made it so much better for me. If you know of any really strong female protagonists in a series like this one, like high epic fantasy, I would love, love, love if you would let me know in the comments below, because I am so interested to see how the other half works in a high fantasy. I'm interested to see how, you know, females would be seen in a high fantasy and how they would work into that world, because as far as I understand, the high fantasy world is so dominated by males, and it's kind of hard to picture a woman outside of a princess or, you know, a love interest in high fantasy. So yeah, just let me know. The genre of this novel is high fantasy. It is also very, very typical high fantasy in terms of the fact that we see magic, we see a world stricken with war that has to be fought off, and we watch the main characters grow themselves out of absolutely nothing into legendary status. At times, I found this novel to be very reminiscent of the Harry Potter series, which to me was kind of like, it was okay. I realized that Harry Potter has had a huge influence on the fantasy literature, but at some points in times it was just like way too overlapped, and I was like, whoa, like this seems way too familiar to me. The magic in the story, however, could have been much better integrated into the story. I actually never really got to see much magic until about 3/4 into the novel. I mean, you know that it existed, and you did hear about some mages in, you know, certain parts of the beginning of the novel, but for the most part, you really had no idea what the magic could do, what these mages could do. You really had very, very little idea. Now, I don't know if this will be better explained in the coming stories, or if they're kind of just going to leave it at the level that it's at, but I feel like magic in this story could have been taken out altogether. For me, the magic wasn't written well enough that it was interesting. I found that when there was magic, it kind of took from the story, and I wanted to hear more about, you know, the actual combat and the actual fighting, which revolves around assassins. I didn't so much as like the side stories where they were throwing, you know, magic fireballs at each other. It just didn't fit for me. It didn't fit in a novel revolving around assassins who use swords and poison. So overall, I gave this story a 3 out of 5 on Goodreads. It was okay. I am interested in picking up the next books, but it isn't one of those books where I'm, you know, running out and I want to like pick up the next book right away. It's kind of one of those books where it's like, okay, well, if I find the second one, you know, for a good price at the used bookstore, I'll pick it up. But other than that, you know, I can just kind of take it for what it is as the first book and be happy with the conclusion. The story itself was very captivating, but I found that it was one of those books that you're really intrigued by and really, really interested in reading. Like, you're going through it and you're like, oh my goodness, this book is so good, and you can't put it down. and you just keep wanting to read and read and read, and you can't put it down, and then when you have to put it down because you have to go to bed or you have to eat or something like that, you put it down and then you don't want to pick it up again. That's why it took me so long to get through this book, other than the fact that it is massive. When I put it down, I didn't want to pick it up again. I don't know. It's one of those books. You know what I mean. So I hope you enjoyed that review. I hope it wasn't too wishy-washy. I still word vomit all over the place, but next up I am going to be reading Of Love and Other Demons by Gabriela Garcia Marquez. So when I'm done this, I will post a review. Keep tuned for that, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I will talk to you next time. Bye-bye!